This, and the other learning resources in this course have been made possible by funding from the European Commission's Erasmus Plus program.
Perfect. Thank you very much for confirming. Today is already the last day of the specialist course on photogrammetry and image-based 3D modeling. And let me use this opportunity to tell you that I really hope that you appreciated this specialist course so far. Today is the last day, and we're going to talk about panoramic imagery and the use of panoramic imagery. So I will show you I will tell you what we're talking about when we speak about panoramic images. I will show you how to make panoramic images with your camera or with a dedicated phone or a camera or a normal digital camera. And also I will show you how to incorporate these panoramic images in a web interface. So we'll do a limited amount of programming at the end of this session. But first I would like to show you some background information about panoramic imagery. So voila, panoramic imagery. So actually, if you see a panoramic image, most of the time you will see something that you see here on this slide. So a horizontally elongated field of view. So most of the time you will see a very long distance from the left to the right, or at least the horizontal dimension is significantly larger than the vertical dimension. And often this gives you some kind of a cylindrical or a spherical perspective. So as if you are standing in one position, one central position, and from that position you can actually look around. It also means that in this case, in contrast with all the things that we have discussed so far when we've spoken about photogrammetry, in this case we don't have parallax in our images. So it means that if we are going to make pictures, we're actually rotating around our central point, horizontal rotation or vertical rotation. And it also means that by doing that and by actually putting our camera in a stationary position, but just rotating the field of view, it will give us obviously no parallax. And if you want to know why, please go back to the second presentation of this specialist course. Actually, this technique is frequently applied in the field. So for example, if you go to a supermarket, if you go to an airport, you will frequently see these little spherical cameras on the ceiling, mounted on the ceiling. And if you take the footage of these cameras, you will see something like this. So this is a spherical perspective, obviously, and will give you actually some kind of a bird's eye view. It's also a very short focal length that is used here, and it will give you the impression of looking at the object as if you are a fish. And it also gives you the opportunity to look in full on your full horizon, so a 360 perspective. Also in real estate, it's heavily applied, especially nowadays during the Corona crisis. At least many Belgian real estate officers are using panoramic images. It's a relatively cheap technique to implement. You just go to different stationing points, make your photo, make sure, of course, that your scene is looking appropriate, and you can actually have 360 tours through the object that you want to sell. Most probably you've also visited Google, and if you go to Google Google Photos or you go to Street View, actually what's happening there is that they also implemented panoramic images. So for example, if I go to maps.google.com and I take, let's go to Navplio. So let's go to Navplio, take this orange man and go to pseudo-random location. Voila, here. Then what you see here is actually a 360 panoramic image of your environment. It is impossible to extract 3D information out of these photos. So you really need multiple of these photos to extract 3D information. But if you take, for example, two 3, 20, 25, 30 photos around the central point, it is definitely impossible to generate 3D geometrics out of it. But of course, for impressions and for visualization purposes, it's quite handy. But you need multiple stations to use it. So virtual tourism is also an application that is heavily benefits from panoramic imagery. Cinematics and virtual reality. In the next slide, so here you see also already 2 examples. In the next slide, I give you also 2 examples. I've loaded them already. So for example, here, an Orthodox Baptist that is put online. So if you enlarge it, you actually have a 360-degree view of this church, of the thing that is happening here. Interesting here in this case that if you look down, and I will also show you why this is the case with panoramic images. Most of the time you see some kind of a brand label or a logo or something like that, or you see the feet of a tripod. Because of course you have a dead angle in your camera, and I will also show this to you in how this works in practice. So most of the time, if you look down or if you look up, you will see something like that. But still, it gives you a very interesting impression of the scene. Another example is here. I found it of National Geographic. So the Victoria Falls. In this case, you don't see it under the camera, but they used 2 cameras in this case. So you have like a full panoramic dome, in this case video, and the video is moving. Very cool about this application. A couple of years ago, we also did a similar experiment by putting a panoramic camera under a drone, take off, and then during the flight we were recording. So you actually had a very similar view as the view as you have that you have here. Not as impressive, of course, but still you get the idea. Yeah, voila. So some very nice examples. And if you go to YouTube or you go just to your browser or your search engine, you will find multiple of these examples online. And of course, and that's why we are here, we can also use this technique for cultural heritage applications. I think I already showed you one of my own examples. So for example, if I go to geo.hongent.be/Syriac, still, I go to tangible, I go to 360s, then you can click here and you actually have, in a few moments, some panoramic images that are acquired on site, and where you have a full 360-degree dome of vision around your object. By the way, the thing that you see here, so the engine behind this is also the engine that we will be using in the exercise. So I will show you some of the exercises, show you how to code in it, so that you can use your own panoramic images also in your own web browser. This is actually quite cool and not very difficult. So it has a lot of potential for cultural heritage applications. Of course, in order to do or to generate these panoramic images, we need hardware. So the hardware, most of the time it consists of very wide angle. So wide angle means very short focal length. Very short focal lenses. Just a little moment. Yeah, I'm sorry. Short focal lenses, fisheye lenses, these kinds of stuff. Or it is also possible to make some kind of a structure where you have multiple cameras mounted in the static frame, and where the images are aligned as such that if you have the edges of one camera, that it actually intersects or goes smoothly into the vision of the next camera. So for example, in the office, we have a camera like this. Here at the moment, that's why I was running away at the beginning of the session. We have this camera. It's actually a Ricoh, old Ricoh S, the Theta S. And you see here two cameras, one here and one exactly on the other side. It is a very, very, very short focal length. So actually what is happening, if I take it like this, it's actually making more or less a 180 by 180 camera of image. And then the software in the camera is used to stitch these two images together and make a full 360-degree dome. Of course, it's also possible to do to make panoramic images without dedicated cameras, so without these specialized panoramic cameras. So just to give you an idea, this instrument here, and we have multiple of them for our students, you will have them for like 200, 300, 400 euros, I think. The thing that you see here, this is also Street View compatible. So the data that you acquire with these cameras can be sent to Google and can be incorporated in Google Street View. They will cost you like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 euros, and going further than that, you go to the mobile mapping vans, the mobile mapping van applications, and the more serious cameras. But of course, it's also possible to make photos with your own cell phone. So for example, if I take my own camera here, let me go to my camera. I'm not sure if you can see it. Yeah, voila. So here, there's an app here in Samsung, and it will actually guide me in a certain direction. It will say, okay, please go to this direction. So in that case, if I start my panoramic image, I just have to rotate around the vertical axis of my camera, and it will automatically stitch all the photos all around your position. And at the end, you will have indeed a 360-degree horizon, of course, also with a field of view that is limited by a normal photo if you put it in a vertical position. But still, it gives you, or it can give you very interesting results. Even better is the use of conventional, or let's say more high-end cameras. So for example, if you have the possession of a single lens camera or a camera that is better than your own cell phone, it is also possible to use that camera and say, okay, I make a photo like this, a photo like this, a photo like this. You just take your photos randomly in a full 300 or virtual 360-degree dome. And then you can use image stitching software for further processing. So for example, the software that I'm using quite often is a free software package from Microsoft. So let me, Microsoft Image Composer, Image Composite Editor. So it's this software. If you want, I can put it on the Moodle platform. Image Composite Editor. Here it is in my environment on my computer. And then you have the option to import your photos. I think I have a project somewhere. SPG. Open projects. Yeah, voila. So for example, here, these are photos that are taken with a drone. So several photos, and then after stitching, you will see that all these different photos are merged together in one massive photo. It's a multi resolution, very high resolution photo that you will end up with in normally in full 360 degrees. So this is the result of a composite where you have multiple photos stitched together. Of course, if you do that, so if you want to make your own photos like this, you really need a lot of overlap between consecutive photos, because it needs the information, the texture from one photo to stitch with the next photo, with the next photo, with the next photo, with the next photo. But still, if you do that properly, you can get quite interesting results, as you see right here. I did something wrong with my mouse, apparently. So that's why it looks a little bit skewed. But anyway, I hope you get the point. Something that you really have to take into account if you make photos like this is the position of the sun. So imagine that you start on the dark side of your scene. So the sun was definitely not here in this position. When you move away from that point, you might go in the direction of the sun and get a result like this. So here I'm looking not directly in the sun because I considered the direction of the sun while taking the photos. But if you don't do that, it is possible to make a photo directly facing the sun. So it will overexpose your photo, and you will have very wide or very bright areas in your panoramic photos, so in the result of your analysis. It is possible to correct for that, so it will. There are software packages like this one, for example, that will do some kind of an auto exposure analysis on the different photos. But of course, it's best to do it under constant light conditions. So each and every photo in every direction is preferably taken in the same illumination conditions. But it is very useful to get started with. So if you want, I will definitely show you the link for Microsoft Image Composite Editor. Some technical information about it. So as I told you, when making photos for panoramic images, which is of course very easy when using a camera like this, because the camera, or actually this is not one camera, it's actually two cameras, and the two cameras are aligned with each other. So they are automatically stitched using the internal parameters of the camera. If you take your cell phone or if you take a camera, it is very important to rotate around the vertical axis. And to be more precise, you actually need to rotate around the entrance pupil or the nodal point of your camera. So between the different photos, there should be no parallax. Remember that parallax was the process. If I do this with my finger and I do this with my finger, then I have a change of projection from my finger against the background. So my finger is changing around the background. If I just have my finger and I'm rotating my eye, I don't have any parallax. So the relation between my finger and the background stays stationary. And this is also the data, or this is also a requirement for images taken aiming at panoramic imagery. So you see that illustrated here in this image, or in these three pseudo photos. You have a tree on the foreground, a building in the background. The camera is rotating, it's taking a new picture, and you see that the relation between the tree and the building on the background has not changed, and the same for the third picture, the fourth picture, the end picture. So all these relations, foreground, middle ground, background, it should all stay the same. This nodal point, or this parallax point of the entrance pupil, as it is called here, is very important that you keep that as your reference point. Normally for large distances, so if you make an object, a panoramic photo of an object on large distances, the deviation of the rotation axis and the nodal point doesn't change, or doesn't matter that much. But the closer you go to your camera, so the closer you go to the center of your spherical or cylindrical projection, the more this becomes a very big deal. And also for high-level applications, so applications where very high quality is required. So if you really want to go to very, very large panoramic images, it is advised to use a frame like this. So this is, for example, a Manfrotto bracket. And this bracket, it has a ruler, or several rulers actually, and it will allow you to set the nodal point on a fixed position. So if you see a body here, you see a lens, the combination of the body and the lens will give you two distances. These distances are summed, and that is the value that you will use here for this ruler. And if you rotate the camera around the axis here, it will actually keep the nodal point on a stationary position. This nodal point will obviously differ as a function of the lens. So every time you take another lens for the same body, you will have to calculate this distance. But if I remember correctly, it has been a while that I did so. Nodal points calculation body lens. There are some, voilà, here for example, entrance pupil database. So for several bodies and several lens combinations, you will see these different distances that will allow you to set this this distance correctly, that you're always rotating around your nodal point. And it's quite a large list of lens body combinations with the values that you will need for to find this this specific point. But normally, if you do this as a tourist, or if you're just making panoramas for panorama making, so just for showing something very fast, it will suffice just to rotate your camera around the central axis by hand, and you don't need this quite expensive bracket system. The influence of this is illustrated here. So this is obviously the good situation. We have a statue, or this is the base of a lamppost, and the left side of the base and the right side of the church, or the dome of the church. This relation is the same as the relation that you see here on the second picture. So it gives you a zoom here, and the zoom based on the zoom, we see that the relation between the foreground and the background is different. Is identical. If you look here on the left picture, you see a different situation. So in this case, there has not been a rotation around the nodal point, but just around another point. So for example, there's also something that you quite frequently see on a very nice vista. People try to make panoramas, and they're making photos like this, where in that case, we are definitely far away from our nodal point. Goed zo, maar papa is een beetje les aan het geven, schat. Anne, ik ben even les aan het geven, kom zo. So what you see here on the left image is that our foreground and our background, so the relation between the background and the foreground, that is different here in this case. So here on the left picture, you see that the left side coincides, or the vertical axis of the left side coincides with the top of the dome, whereas here we are looking at the left side of the dome. And the result of that is that if you start stitching your photos, that this is the correct situation. So the stitching will take place on several photos, and it will assume a central projection of your a cylindric or a spherical projection of your different photos. So all the pixels are nicely aligned in this on this dome or on this sphere, on the cylinder. If that is not the case, so if this nodal point is not correctly, you will end up with something like this. So ghosting objects, where you have a very good foreground, but of course, yeah, I think it's quite obvious, if you have the top of the dome here and you have the top of the dome here, then obviously if you stitch those two pictures, you will have two domes instead of only one dome, and the orientation or the position will differ as a function of the number or the index of your photo. So this is definitely a situation that you want to avoid. And you can avoid that by not making pictures like this, but by making pictures like this, or by using a frame to set your nodal points. So if you have used your camera to make pictures, and you can use freeware or open source or free software, let's say, to generate these photos, these panoramas. Of course, you need a way to publish these data, and there are several tools available for that. So, for example, we can, we are at our institute, we are also using Virtual Tour, which is commercial software with a very nice graphical interface. And it also has the ability to upload your data to the server, and then it's all server based, and you can just extract the data based on the requirements of the visitor. And there are also some other database or online services available for publication of panoramic images like RoundMe. But in our case, we will do everything in Panelum. Panelum is a JavaScript-based library that we will use for our publication. Just to give you an example of this commercial software, so I will go back to my own server, and I go here to FTI Lab. So this has nothing to do with cultural heritage. This is an application on promoting our textile laboratory. So I took several panoramic images, and you can actually click on a logo. Let me go inside the laboratory. Inside. And you can actually go through the entire building, look at the different textile machinery that is set here. You can zoom in, zoom out. And in this case, I use this Google Street View camera for this project. Very interesting, and to the extent of my knowledge, this is not yet or not possible with the platform, the free platform that we will be using, is also the ability to add maps. So this is just a very simple sketch that you can use to go to different locations. So you can work with clickable content here and go from one room to another. So imagine that you have taken several panoramas on your archaeological site or in your museum, that you have a map here and the visitor can just go from one room to another. Of course, another option is just to make a list of it. And then you will have something like this, where you have the different photos listed under each other, or there are several ways. You can even make, I'm thinking out loud now, a map-based web service based on QGIS, for example. QGIS uploaded to map server, and then you can link your photos to your map. So there are many options to publish your data. But in our case, once again, we will be using this JavaScript interface. So some other examples. The first time I start working with this application, with the application that we are going to use, so the JavaScript library, was site documentation in Honduras. So actually, let me first explain a little bit about Panelum itself. So Panelum is a free library that you can use. If you access the website, you will see a very interesting example of the website, of the database itself. So you can go from one room to another. There's some information available. And actually the exercises that I will give you are the same exercises as the exercises that you will see under the examples here. So these examples are implemented in a NAVIO context. And I will guide you through the different steps of this tutorial. Of course, we will need our own server to do that. So I prepared something for you. By the way, is there anybody working on a MacBook at the moment? Or are you all working on Windows?
I'm working on a Mac.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, that's very good news. Because I have an executable that runs on Windows. If you have a MacBook, I have to give you some Python code to start your local server. But that is not the case in this case, apparently. So it's free software. It's very well documented, quite easy to implement in your own web environment or online environment. And the first time that we started using it was actually where we were working here on alluvial plain, looking for Maya archaeology. And at a certain moment, we were not able to, or we were not able to work here because of heavy rainfall. So it was very swamp in this area, but it was dry that day. So we were just waiting to for the soil to dry up. And it was a very good moment to do some experimenting with our drone. So we took our near infrared camera, we mounted on our drone, and we flew to, I think this is an elevation of, I think it was like 800 or almost 1,000 meters. And then I took photos around the axis of the drone. So I was just rotating my drone, make a picture, rotate, make a picture, rotate, make a picture. And then I used my software to stitch this photo, and this give you a very nice near infrared impression of the Honduras landscape near the border of Guatemala. So this was actually the start. And then we worked on it for promotion of the archaeological site. So we took several images over the site, put it in an environment, and that was all sent to the American partners in that case. Then a second time that we had to work with this was a research project, a Hoogent research project on the reactivation of Flemish transitional streets. I'm not very happy with this translation, but it's actually the streets that go to the very poshy or very the more expensive streets with the very expensive stores and a lot of people coming there. Well, they have to pass certain secondary streets, and these secondary streets in many cities, at least in the Flemish region, these streets are dying because the rents are too high. There are not many people passing these streets. So this was a research on finding the reasons for, okay, why are these people moving out of their streets and why are these streets dying? So we took several panoramic images here. And then the economist and the sociologist, they assigned several points with clickable content. So you can the user could press here and say, okay, there are bicycles on the street. Why are there bicycles on the street? They should be removed. Or there's here a construction site. This construction site, the duration of the construction should be more limited, etc., etc. So just to give an idea and use panoramic images in an online environment to communicate with our project stakeholders. So that was that project. Yeah, I already showed you the Fashion and Textile Innovation Lab. So the problem here was that when we have open days in our institute, people are coming to our campus, but this is an off-campus building, so it's a little bit further away from the main building. Potential students are not able to visit that site, so we made panoramic images, put everything in a screen or in a online environment, and when people were coming to our main campus, they could actually access in an online environment they could actually virtually access the building and get more information about the different equipments that is situated over there. By the way, I have a little visitor at the moment. Zwaai maar even naar de mensen. Zeg maar hallo.
Hallo.
Hello everybody.
Ah.
Hi.
Hallo. Hi.
And it was a very good way to promote the campus. Oké, het is goed. Ik ga verder mijn lesgeven, schat. And then last but not least, but this is a very ugly photo, the room where we keep our topographic equipment. The reason I'm showing you this is that this is officially a non-accessible area for our students, or it is a non-accessible area for visitors. Imagine that this is a laboratory of a museum, for example, but you still want to show you the equipment that you have. You want to link the manuals to the equipment. And in that case, you can actually virtually visit this forbidden area, access the equipment, prepare yourself, access the manuals for your tools. Also very interesting in this case to mention, I just showed you in the during the video of the Baptist, so the panoramic Baptist. I showed you that you frequently find some kind of a label, a brand label, to mask the bottom of your camera. In this case, I didn't do that, so you clearly see the poles of your of the tripod and even a little bit of the camera itself. So that's why you see this very strange-looking object at the bottom of the photo. But it gives you a very nice idea of the equipment. It allows you to link manuals, so just PDFs, using markers to the different equipment, and it's a very good way to do that, especially now in Corona time. So here, for example, this is a printer, a textile printer. It has a logo here or a marker. The marker refers to the brand and the type of the hardware. And by clicking on it, you can actually access the manual or some meta information about that object. So in my case, just some very little information. If you decide, I'm not a salesperson, definitely not. I'm a researcher and not assigned to any commercial company or something like that. But I love to use this device because it's very handy. You can just put it in your breast pocket like this. But of course, this is very fragile equipment. As you can see, I have put this rubber protection around the camera. Otherwise, it's very fragile if you drop it accidentally, and that happens with students from time to time. It is very easy to break the instrument, and definitely the lens. If you look at your cell phone, for example, so let me take my cell phone. The cell phone actually has a lens, and the lens itself is a little bit inside the camera. It's protected by a plastic protection. In this case, because of the fact that we're working with that small focal length, you can see that the lens is heavily spherical, pointing outside. So it's very easy if you drop it, for example, or if you put it on a table, it's very easy to make scratches on your lens. So that's why it must be handled with care. But the interesting about this instrument is that that it's very easy to use. So if you want to take a photo, just press the shutter button. Of course, if you do it like this, you will have my face covering last portions of the photo. So what you frequently see, if people don't use a tripod, because you can just use a conventional tripod for it. If you don't have a tripod, but you have a camera like this, most of the time you see that people are putting it on top of their head, or maybe even a little bit above their heads, and then you limit your black spots or just bad information under your camera. In this case, for this camera and many other cameras that you will find on the market, it is also possible to use applications, so just Android applications, iPhone applications. And in that case, if you have such an application, you position your camera somewhere in the area where you want to make your photo, put it on a tripod, then hide yourself behind the wall or behind the construction, and you can use the app to remotely operate your camera. So that's another way of making your pictures. For example, in this case with the Ricoh Theta S. It comes with some accessories. So we bought this bag. In the normal circumstances, I would have given this instrument to you and we would go into the city to experiment with it, but it's unfortunately not the case. But I'm just showing you what comes with it. So there's a little tripod that you can put it on a table, protection case, interchange cable. This is also very cool. There's an HDMI cable with the camera, so you can actually use it as a 360 webcam. Maybe if I have time during the break, I will try to make it work. But in that case, you can just use it as a webcam and have full access to the things that are happening here. So you will see my kids playing in the garden, stuff like that. But it requires an application for that. So yeah, how that works. The first thing that, of course, if you have taken your pictures. Oh, there's a chat. Okay. Then during the break, we will have a look for a solution. But thank you for your remark. We will solve it, no problem. Another checks. If you're using this specific camera, there is a camera that comes with it. So if you go to Google Store, you will find something like, I think it's called just Ricoh Data or Data app. And that allows you to manipulate the camera. If you don't have a camera like this, then most of the time, for example, here on my Samsung, but I've also seen it on other cell phones like the Huawei devices and the Motorola, stuff like that. They offer the opportunity to make photos like this. So if, for example, if I start my camera, if I start my camera like this, it will force me to go in a certain direction. And otherwise, if you have taken your pictures just by manually snapping your data, I will actually just put it in the chat link. But in this case, I'm very sorry because I have no idea if there is also a Mac a program that they will allow you to make panoramas for free. So this is a free app, but most probably, and I cannot imagine myself that, or I cannot imagine that Windows is developing software for MacBooks. So you take your photos and then you process them, and then indeed you need a platform, a commercial or open source platform to publish your data. And that's actually what we are going to do in the next few slides. Before doing that, or before going a little bit further, I would like to suggest that we have our break a little bit earlier. So normally what I would like you to ask is that if you go to the data platform, or the platform where you can find the different data for the exercises, make sure that you have the PG_8_demo_data available. And if you downloaded that folder, you will find a file and a folder, an executable and a folder. Even for the Mac user, you can do that. And in the folder, you will find two other folders, data and results. So this is actually the results of the demonstrations that I'm going to show you. And this is the data that we will sequentially use exercise by exercise. And what I would like you to do during the break, and then afterwards I would like to take some time to make sure that, that this is running with all of you. So all you Windows users, if you double click this this executable, miniweb.exe, it will give you a warning message that you will have to add an exception to your firewall. So you can just enable that. And then normally, if you go to in your browser to localhost 8000 $8000, so localhost $8000, you will see something like this. So actually what we did here is that we gathered access to these folders as if we were online somewhere. And if you then go to, for example, to the results, you can already see what we are going to do. The browser is not important as long as it supports JavaScript. Ah, Hugin, of course. I was not aware that it's that it also works for Mac. So let's have a break. I will use my break to get my MacBook, download the data, and then make sure that you can also work on Mac. So let's, what's the time now? It's, let's meet in 15 minutes. I'm back here. The Mac users, are they also able to follow me? Could you please confirm? Okay, perfect. There was somebody else, I think. So normally you have downloaded your data. For one reason or another, I'm not able to share my my screen with my Windows computer. It doesn't allow me, so it's a little bit too late to do that. But in any case, if you have downloaded your data, and I will assume here that you have downloaded the data in your download folder, if you open your the zip folder in your Finder, you will normally end up with a new folder, and the new folder is called pg_08_demo_data. So what you do then is you go to your terminal. So you press Command Space and go to terminal, or you just press the terminal button if that's available in your in the bar, in your desktop bar. And then in that in the terminal, you go to the location of the download. So for example, by default, it starts with my home directory. So I press CD space downloads. And in that case, I'm in my download folder. So voila, I did that here as well. And what you do then is you copy paste or you type in the code that I gave you here. What will happen here is that Python, so that's let's say a scripting environment or a program environment, is starting up, and it will start a module entitled http.server. So that is actually the virtual server that will be running, and then a space with 8000, and 8000 will be the port. So if you type that in, it's very annoying that I can show you it here to you. Maybe I can just install Zoom. Is it working so far? Do you see something like a server is starting or anything like that? So normally, if you are in your console, in your download folder, and you type in Python space -m space http dot server space 8000, you just copy paste it, you will see something like server http on 0.0.0 port 8000 with some blah 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 under it. Can you confirm that it is working, please? And meanwhile, yeah, perfect. Okay, then in your browser, you go to localhost /8000. Can you tell me what you see? Do you see some things like this, or do you get an error?
Yeah, I see exactly this directory of it works in my case.
Meanwhile, I will log in. Currently in error, but the internet has stopped. Oh no, it has nothing to do with your internet. If you give me 5 seconds to retrieve the code of this meeting. Zoom. Zoom meeting ID. I don't see myself in the waiting room. Yeah, I'm trying to work on it. I was not aware of it that deelnemen. I will invite myself and show it on my MacBook. Typo. Yeah. Voila. Now I'm a participant of my own meeting. Sorry for the inconvenience here. Share screen. Disable attendees screen sharing. I will make myself host. Okay. For one reason or another, it's always a tricky thing to start with Mac. Okay, I'm back in the waiting room normally. Please wait, the meeting will start soon. Now I will join and I will make myself host. Yeah. And I will share my screen. Continue share. Okay, can you please confirm, sorry for the little inconvenience, can you please confirm that you're now looking on my Mac? Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much, and thank you for your patience. So, no, hi.
You have an amazing reverb on your sound.
Okay, perfect. So what I did, in my case, I put my zip folder just in my documents. I unzipped my my folder. Then I went here to my terminal. Let me unclick it. And I type in or I copy paste. We have voice echo. I will mute this one, stop the video too, and I will press this in here. Technology. Voila. Hello again. So I have my zip folder here. I unzipped my my folder, so it's actually here. And then in my terminal, I will just start from scratch. So command space terminal. And then here in this case, I first, of course, I go to my documents or to my downloads, to the location where I have this this folder, and then I
copy paste Python space -m space http.server.8000 and I press enter. Then you see something like this. And if I go to my browser and I type in localhost 8000, then I will see nothing. However, if I go to localhost 8000/pg_08_demo_data, or if you want to rename it, that's also possible. You get you are redirected here, and then you can click on htdocs, and now you're actually in the results. In this case, I'm in the results folder, as if I am working in an online environment. So I can just click here, and this is actually one of the results that we will be working on. So this is for the Mac users. In order to close this application, because this is actually just a server that's running locally, as if you were having this server somewhere in your server room of your university of your institute or something like that. If you want to close it, simply press Ctrl+C and the server is down again. And in that case, if you refresh this page, you will just get an error. The site can't be reached. Now, of course, it cannot be reached because my server is down. So you have to start your server again, and then it will work like this. Voila, that's for Mac users. And now I will make myself host again. So participants, where am I? I'm one of these. I will go back to my Windows PC. Just to be absolutely sure. Make host. I hope I'm this one. And I will. Do you want to continue? Yeah. And normally I'm back on my normal computer again. Okay. Was this clear for the Mac users?
Was this clear for the Mac? Oh, let me mute this one. Was this clear for the Mac users? Perfect. So for the Windows users, I will just close my MacBook. By the way, I've always been a very convinced Windows user, but giving workshops like this and getting the experience of Mac users, last autumn I decided to buy myself a MacBook. So this is one of the times that it's very handy to have one at hand. So anyway, for the Windows users, it's a little bit more convenient. Once again, you just go to your folder. The folder is supposed to be unzipped. That's very important to mention here. You press MiniWeb, and then here under localhost, you see these results. The reason why we do all this tralala, that if you go to htdocs data, so these are the data that we're going to work on in the next 30 minutes, let's say. If you double click one of the HTML pages and you start your project, you get an error like this. So it says the file on my location dot blah 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 cannot be accessed, and that's for security reasons. So in order to oh, you're most welcome. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. In order to avoid this security message, you have to work on a local server. And that's why we have to do this. By the way, next week, when we start talking about the laser scan data, we will also use something like this. Actually, we'll use exactly the same like this for point cloud visualization. So we will work with very large point clouds, and you will use a local server to visualize these point clouds, in case you don't, of course, have access to your own server somewhere in on your institute or your company or on your or whatever. So let's continue with our slides. So we are able to solve this problem by having our own local server. We have our server running, and then a very good thing here about these exercises. Once again, these exercises are extracted from the Panelum website, the tutorials, and I put it in a Nafplio context. The data folder, it contains the files that we will modify in the coming moments. The results is actually what can be expected after successfully completed the exercises. So I would advise you to make a copy of the data folder, so that if something goes wrong and you have no idea where you mistyped something or anything like that, that you always have a backup. Of course, you will do the same, obviously, when you're working in normal documents. Always work with enough backups. And then, yeah, you can always compare your results with the results that I also prepared for you. So what we have to do is we need some kind of a notepad or a text editor to modify the code inside the viewer. So we have a series of panoramas. So if you see here, these are the data folders that we will access in a few moments. By the way, if I'm going too fast anywhere, please don't use the chat function, but just unmute yourself and say, oh, please, can you repeat yourself here or there? I think that's the most convenient way to do that. I will just guide you through the different demos step by step. So here are the files that we will access in our browser, or that will be called via our browser. In the CRS folder, you will actually find the codes that is behind our viewer. So we will not modify this. This is just JavaScript and CSS or Cascade styling scripts that are behind it. So for your information, we will not cover that here. And the images are in the IMG folder. So in the IMG folder, you will find several panoramic images of the Syntagma square in Nafplio, and also a historical photo, dark night photo. So these photos will be put in a panoramic viewer. And actually, for example, the first results will look like this, for example. So we have clickable content here, and this actually allows us to access our first photo. Just a little moment. Hoe komt die vlag van je fiets af? Heb je die nou kapot gemaakt? Dat is niet goed, hè? Well, so this is one of this is actually the first result of what we will obtain. In order to access these files, so let's open our HTML folder, not by double clicking on it, but first let's try to access it via our web browser. So we go to data and then we press demo_simple, and you will see something like this. The file blah 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 could not be accessed. So this is normally the case when using your local host, your local server, localhost 8000 data 03_demo01_simple.html. This should be the result, because we haven't done anything with our demo data yet. In order to solve this, you can right click on press it with 2 fingers for the Mac users, and you can go to your notepad editor or your text editor or any text editing software that you have on your computer, So for most Windows users, it will be Notepad, for example. So you can open it in Notepad. And you actually see here a very simple code that will give you access to the code of the HTML page. Do you also all see something like this? Please say so if that is not the case. Okay, what is happening here? I will not give you a course on HTML, JavaScript, or CSS because that's beyond the scope of this specialist course. The thing that I want to show you is actually to show you how easy it is to use existing code and implement it in with your own data with minimal modifications of the code. So the first thing you see here in this simple HTML file is a first parameter here. So first of all, you see here the some meta information, a title, give a logical title here. So what you see here is actually the same as what you see here. So if I change it to, for example, Pano viewer, so I said title, Pano viewer, title. If I save it and here I press refresh, then I see here my title in the tab of my page. It has also changed. Very important here is that you don't change these brackets. So please don't touch these brackets. As soon as you modify a bracket, for example, I have something like this. I save it and I press refresh, I will get an error. So all the data is set here in my, all the data that's in the file is now in the tab and my page is just empty. So please make sure that if you modify something that you don't change the structure of the page. So that's the title. Then after the title, you will find two references to the styling file and the JavaScript file. And if you are familiar with Windows or with Mac, normally you will use absolute path, so C / program file / program blah 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 / executable.exe. In this case, it's all local in relation to our HTML page in this case. So our HTML page is here, and then from this location, it is looking for CRS. And then it is looking for panelum.css for my style sheet, and it's looking for CRS / panelum.js for my JavaScript. But of course, we will not touch this here. This is just for your information. And then we finally somewhere, because here we can set the width and the height of our viewer. So for example, just to get started, I can say, okay, I want a width. So my horizontal dimension of 600 pixels and my height will be, let's make it 300 pixels. So now width / space 600 px and the semicolon, yeah, the colon and the semicolon, and then for the height I have 300 px semicolon. Then that's the header, so that will define how our page should be handled. That's just some information on HTML. And then here in the script, we actually make our panoramic viewer. And the very important parameter here, actually the only parameter that we have to modify, is our image location. In this case, I want to show in the img file the first one. So here this is 01.8.jpg. And what I do here in this case, I say this is img because we are referring to the next folder, img in this case. This is a / if I'm not mistaken, and then I say 01.jpg. And I save my file. So this is actually the first exercise already. We can go to our browser, refresh our page, then I see a viewer with dimensions of 600 by 300 pixels. And if I click on load, then I actually have access to my first Pano viewer in the basic environment. Is this all working? Or are there any problems so far?
Could you bring up the notepad again, please?
If I'm not happy with the dimensions of my viewer, I can set it to 1200 by 600 pixels or 800 pixels or any random value. And if I refresh it, you will see that now I have a much larger viewer. Okay. So one panoramic picture, one viewer with certain dimensions and a certain title. And we have modified that and we have our result. The next thing, the next option that we will set is the fact that apparently while we were working with this page, every time that I refresh my page, or every time when I want to get access to this page, I have to click to load the Pano. This is very useful, especially for mobile applications. If you're working with very large panoramas, that not all the time that people are accessing your page, that the user has to wait for the panorama to load. But in this case, we only have our panorama. So I definitely don't want to click this, this button all the time. And actually, the auto load function is something that you can modify yourself. So you see it here as well. It's an auto load parameter, and if you set the auto load parameter to true, actually we can just access, start from our second example. That may be better because there's something else that's interesting to show you. So if I have my second example, my second demo here, I go to my web page. I'm change this to stu_auto load. Then I get nothing. In that case, if you don't see anything, it's always good to right click on your page, inspect, and then go to the console. And what you see here is that there was a problem loading the resources. And what resources? It's behind. Yeah, voila. It's Panelum is not found. .css is not found. GS is not found. And that's actually what you can see here in this slide. So this is wrong. And we have to set it. And why do we have to set it? Because here the location of our style sheet is obviously not panelum.cs because we have put it in src folder, and the same holds, of course, for this one, src, yeah, and the same holds here, src, voila. So if we now go back to the browser, we press refresh. Now we don't have this this error, so we can just click it away. And if we click here, we have the same result as the first exercise. Well, this reloads function, that's the option that is now commented. So this is just JavaScript, and JavaScript, the Panelum viewer, request multiple attributes. So one of the attributes here is that the panorama is of type equirectangular. So that's the rectangular image that we are working with. The panorama has a certain location, and we have auto load that is, in this case, by default, is in false mode. I've commented it out, so I can just remove these slashes, save my project, and if I go back to my browser, refresh my page, then you see that it's automatically loading. So if I undo that, now I have to click on Panorama and I'm loading my my Pano. If I uncomment this, or if I change, yeah, if I uncomment this and I refresh, it's automatically loading. And I think if you change this to false, that we're back in the old situation. So false and true will also have the same same result here. Are you still with me?
Trying.
Wonderful. Before using, just some of my personal background, before using this library, and I start using it, I think the first time was like 5 or 6 years ago. This was actually for me the first time that I start experimenting with JavaScript. So it was a very nice way to get familiar with it, experiment with it. If you know a little bit of this, you start reading about it, and then I started reading about map servers and blah blah blah. So it's incredibly cool stuff that you can do with this. Also here, if I look on the bottom, this is the story that I told you about. This is actually, if you go back to your camera, what you see here, this this line is actually the boundary of my two pictures, and you also see a little tripod under it, but for your information. So the third exercise, auto rotate. Yeah, the option to rotate your panorama after after being loaded. So let's open our auto rotate script. And then here in this case, you see an auto rotation value. Maybe if you want, you can also set auto load. Auto load? Yeah, auto load. Auto load semicolon is true, comma, and auto rotate is set to 0. So let's go there. This page, auto rotate. Auto load. Auto load. By the way, the code is case sensitive. It's also important to mention. So this parameter, this auto rotate parameters will modify the rotation speed of your Pano. If I set it to 10, for example, if I refresh my page, you will see that my panorama is changing. So this can give you very interesting things to do, or interesting impressions. For example, I modify this page to 1200 and I make it a little bit slower. By doing that, you can just play with the values. As soon as I start modifying my page or modifying my view, the auto rotate will stop. So it's only during initialization that it is that is working like this. So an interesting feature, not always necessary, but that's also a possibility that you can do here. A preview is also quite nice to do. So a preview means that if you are accessing a certain web page or certain panorama, that before you have access to the page or before you see this this button press here to load the panorama, is that you have actually see another picture. Like it's the thing that you see here. So what we're gonna do here in this small exercise is that as soon as you access the panorama, you see a background image. With click here to access instead of the default background, and then you're redirected to the panorama. So let's do that as well. Preview, open in Notepad, and then I can set here, for example, in my image folder, So img preview.jpg. Save that and access the preview page. Voila, and here it is. We have our background photo, and after clicking here, we have access to our panorama. If I just take a random photo, for example, Navplio, of course, when doing this, you have to take care of copyrights. Copy image address. Let me try this. Refresh. Voila. So what I did now, I actually just took the path of a photo on the internet. Apparently, I took the Google search path to it, so it's not that convenient. No, it's referring to my cache. But in any case, here you see the photo that I just saw on the internet. So it's a background of Navplio, and you can take, of course, whatever photo you would like to take. If I want this photo, let's open it in a new tab. Allez. Yeah, coincidentally, I have an embedded photo, so it's not going to work. I open image in new tab. That's the one I was looking for. So here I have a URL, and if I want to use that URL here, voila. Now I'm using this picture as a preview. If I go back here, press refresh. So now it's actually taking the photo from the internet, using it as a background, and as soon as I click here on my photo, I'm back in the Syntagma Square in Navplio, just by modifying this preview parameter. By the way, these codes, they're all offered via the tutorial website, as I already showed you. If you want to start experimenting with it, or at least that was also the way that I was doing it. If you want to do it differently, feel free to do so, of course. But if you want to use several features, just copy paste from my code or from the code from the tutorial and try to make your own viewer with it. A very useful way to familiarize yourself with it. I will close all this and let's go to the next one. So a preview. Yeah, of course, in many cases you want to add an author and a title to your pages. So for example, if we are looking at a certain photo, so we were now looking at Syntagma Square. So here, for example, I want to show the end user of my photo that he's looking at Syntagma Square. So in that case, I can add a title, and the title is Syntagma Square, for example. And I can also add an author. Stal, voila. Very important to see here, or to mention here, is that all the parameters are separated by commas. So I have a parameter and a variable and then a comma, parameter, variable, comma. The parameters and the variables are separated by colons. And then I have a comma, a comma, a comma. My text, so the name of my variables is between double quotes. And also my free text is also in double quotes. That's just convention for JavaScript. That you have to respect. So let me save this. And now normally if I go back to my second, it was the autoload. In this case here, I have indeed my title, Syntagma Square, and I have an author. And this will stay here. Pardon. This will stay here as long as I'm here in this photo. If you want to change the style or additional information, you will have to duck into the CSS file. But I will not show you how to do that, because that will go a little bit too far. But at least now we know if we have a panoramic photo, we can add a title and an author to it. Voila, and here's the result. Yeah. Indications of viewing directions. I'm just showing you for your own information that that's also possible. This is actually the option that if, for example, in this case, if there is a compass in your camera and you want to use that compass information, then using this one here, you can actually set your orientation. So if there is a true north, or if you know where the north is, for example, based on the sun or based on the compass measurements that you did, you can actually add here a compass. And even more, you can define your north offset parameter. So, for example, if this is my camera, my north is in this direction, but it starts in this direction, then this angle here is my offset. And by implementing that offset, the compass is pointing in the correct direction. So that's what you see here. If you want to disable this compass, because you've most probably seen, I think also here's also a compass. If you think that compass is annoying, then you can just say, in this case, for example, compass colon false. And in that case, if I go back to my second example, then the compass is gone. So if you don't want a compass, just disable that field by saying compass is false. Are you still with me?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you for confirming. And now let's say something about rotations, orientations of the photos itself. So imagine that we have a sphere. Imagine that we have a sphere, and of course a sphere has, as everything in a 3D space, has three rotational axes. We have an axis in the Z direction, we have an axis in the Y direction, and we have an axis in the X direction. So a yaw, a pitch, and a roll, respectively. These rotation parameters, we can use them to actually set our vision points. So, for example, in this case, what you see here, we have a pitch, a yaw, a pitch, and a yaw. These are the parameters that we will be using. Also, you can use the roll, but we are not discussing that because it will change our view too much. But the pitch and the yaw are very useful parameters. For example, if I just refresh my page again, this one, and I go to my code and I just type in what I see here. So for example, I say my pitch is equal to -43 and my yaw is equal to 15. What I'm actually doing here is saying, okay, my pitch, I will just I will rotate my my panorama around the y-axis with -43 degrees, and I will rotate my my panorama around the z-axis with 20 degrees, or 15 degrees in this case. So just to show you the result of that, I will make a new tab and load it again. It's not working because most probably I didn't save it yet. So if I refresh my page, exit my page again, now you see then I'm actually I've changed my viewport downwards, and most probably if I click here and I go up, you also see that I'm pointing a little bit towards the right. So my right-left orientation is my yaw in this case, and pointing upward and downward is my my pitch. Yeah. So you can modify that as you wish. For example, if you want to look upwards, so make it 20 degrees, and the yaw, let's make it 180 degrees. And in this case, if we reload our page, we are looking in the opposite direction, just a little bit upwards. And that's what we can do by using these parameters. The last parameter that you see here, the horizontal field of view, is actually the opening angle of your panorama. So if I say off is equal to, what does it say here, 20 degrees, then in this case we have a horizontal opening angle of 20 degrees. If I refresh this, now we are really zoomed in. We have a very narrow angle in our watching direction. If I make it very large, so 120 degrees, and I open my page, now I have a really wide angle for my field of view. So also a very interesting parameter to play with. It is very interesting to use these parameters and say, for example, okay, we have a building. So let me comment this out. Now I'm just using my default values. I will also put it in auto load. Auto load is true. Reload it, voila. So imagine that I'm not interested in the Syntagma Square itself, not in the archaeological museum, but that I'm interested in this building, for example. So every time that I open my my panorama, I want the user instantly, or at after initializing the viewer, that he is watching in this direction. What you should do then is follow these steps. So this is a way of calculating the pitch and the yaw based on pixels. So what I did here, I made a cross in one of my panoramas, and then based on this cross, I was actually calculating the number of pixels going left or right and going up and down. And then using this equation, you can actually calculate or convert your pixels to angular values. This is possible, but it's actually quite annoying to do that, especially when you want to do that for many points. So that's why, voila, here you see, if you want to take this point, for example, you measure the pixel coordinates, you convert them to angles, and blah, blah, blah. So that's just for your own information. Then you can use these parameters, and let me just type them over. So we have a pitch of 26,92. The yaw is 107,28, and the horizontal field of view is 20. And if we reload, nothing is happening because we don't have a comma here. Voila. And we are looking in the correct direction, the building, the same building as you see right here. So we have just duplicated this page. But you can imagine that this is not a very convenient way of extracting these two angular values by calculating the minimum, maximum, and all these pixels, and using Excel for that. It's not very convenient. So fortunately, let me skip this one. Yeah, fortunately, there is an option, and this option can be found in exercise 9 already. So if you go to exercise 9, you will see a very, very useful thing. It's called the hotspot debug function. So if I take that one, or I can just load it, in exercise 9. Data, exercise 9. What you see here, if I right click, go to inspect, and now I go to console, so right click inspect, is that actually the place where I'm clicking in my photo, it will automatically calculate for me my my pitch and my yaw angles. So for example, if I want to have this point here as my new center, so here the edge of this building, the corner of this building, I can just take here the 10.9 value. So that's yeah, let's take the second exercise, because otherwise we might have an interference. 10.9 for the pitch. What else did we have? 140 for the yaw. 3 and a horizontal field of view. Let's keep it on 20. So now if I go back to my second exercise with the parameters that I just typed in, you will see that indeed I am pointing in the direction of this building. The same building as the one that I had here for my pitch and yaw determination. So if I take another one, so for example, I want this point, then we can do exactly the same. Just say our pitch, so our vertical angle is 36.1. The yaw is minus 72.1. We save it. We go back to our page, reload it, and we're looking at the corner of the opposite building, just another building in this case. And this goes quite fast. Of course, after modifying this parameter, you can just simply comment this out. So just 2 slides, and then you don't see these coordinates anymore in the in your console of your web browser. If we know how to assign coordinates to different parts of our picture, we can actually also go to the idea of adding information to our 3D model, and that's also what you see here. So there are several hotspots. We call them hotspots. That's are these information signs. If I go here to my this page, you also see one hotspot at 0, 0, pitch of 0 and a yaw of 0, with some information. When I go with my mouse over this information sign, I get to syntagma square or blah blah blah. So for example, if I want to make a hotspot for this building, I can just click here. I say 1593. And what I can do then is, this is a hotspot with a pitch of 15.2. I have a yaw of 39.6. And I say, okay, this is a building. And possibly you can even add a URL. So for example, to Heritage Management Organization.org. Voila, something like this. So let's remove this for a little moment. So now if I save this, I will have one hotspot, one and only one hotspot. This one hotspot is assigned to this panorama. So I have one panorama with only one hotspot. And if I go back here, I refresh my page, then I have my hotspot here. Indeed, this is a building, and if I click on this dot, I'm redirected to the website of the Heritage Management Organization, heritagemanagement.org. Voila. If you want to add more hotspots, so for example, you want a hotspot here, you can just simply copy this, separated as you would do with the parameters in your panorama viewer with a comma. And then here you can say, okay, this was 12.8. We had a yaw of minus 6.5. 6.5. This is an information hotspot. And we say Archaeological Museum. And in this case, we don't want to add a URL. We save it. We not save our page. We refresh our site. And then here we already had our previous one. And here we have a new one. And if you click on this information sign, of course, we are not redirected to any other web page. So that's working with hotspots. And then in this case, definitely working with this automated patch calculation is very, very convenient. Also, if you want to play with the field of view, you see now that I'm in the field of view of 50. If I'm zooming out, I'm in the field of view of 120. So it also gives you some kind of an indication of your field of view. Voila. So that's for hotspots. And then almost the last one. So there are 11 and we're now at 10. A very cool thing that you can also do is not only say, okay, we have one panorama with some information attached to it, but we can also link several panoramas together. And that's what you see here. In that case, let me go to slide 2 or 10. So I'm opening 2 or 10 now to explain what's happening here. So what's happening here, we have our default viewer. So we still have our viewer of 600 by 400 pixels. And in our viewer, we don't have only one panorama, but we have a scene that you see here. And this scene contains 1, 2, 3 panoramas. So a viewer contains scenes, and the scene can consist of multiple panoramas. A scene has a title. So the first scene is entitled Square. It's just an interior name. And it also has an alias. And the alias here is what you see here as title. So the alias is Syntagma Square. If we press on that panorama, we get a horizontal field of view of 90 degrees. We had a pitch of 0 degrees with a yaw of 0 degrees. We have a type and a reference to an image. It will load automatically. And in this picture, we will have 1, 2, 3 information. 2 info hotspots. And we have 1 hotspot that is not only info, but it is actually a scene. So what's happening here? We have a scene entitled Square, referring to a panorama with more parameters. And in that scene, we have several hotspots, and one of these hotspots is actually referring to a scene. And what scene? It's the scene ID museum. So if we click on this hotspot in our photo, we are actually redirected to the scene ID museum. And this is our scene ID museum. It's entitled Archaeological Museum. It will open with several parameters, with several hotspots that are also referring to other references. So in order to start that, you can actually make a very large network of several panoramic images, link them together using several hotspots. So you can combine in scene hotspots and information hotspots. So in this case, my first scene will be, for example, Square. So this is referring to scene ID. And the author, let me just put here CS. Let me save this and go to exercise 10. 10. Voila, so this is my home hotspot. Of course, here, all my hotspots are merged together. So I will have to find the coordinates of my next panorama. So in order to do that, we can just go back to demo 9 and say, okay, we want this hotspot debug. We want to have it on. It's a parameter of the viewer itself. So I will just put it here. Yeah, I will just put it there. If I refresh, voila. Then let's say, for example, my next hotspot should be here, going to the museum. Then I take these coordinates and say, okay, this first hotspot should point in direction minus 21.1 with a yaw of 11.5, and it's called Archaeological Museum, and all the rest I will not consider right here. So I will just delete them. I save my my script, I refresh my page, and what I see now, apparently I was mistyping, most probably because this is minus, no, yes. Yeah, that's much better. So now here I have my hotspot, and if I click on this hotspot, my scene, I'm actually accessing this hotspot. This hotspot brings me to my new panorama. And in this case, I already prepared some new hotspots in this case. So on museum, you will have access to Syntagma Square, so the previous panorama, and you can get access to the next panorama. And here in this panorama, so this Parliament panorama, Parliament panorama only has one hotspot going back to the Archaeological Museum. What is very important here to keep in mind, and I will open my my Paint to illustrate that. And this is, by the way, a practice that I always implement when I'm working with panoramas. So let's say, for example, that that this is my square, and that my first panorama is here, my second panorama is here, and my third panorama is here. Of course, what you want to do is say, okay, I want to go as a user from this panorama to this panorama, and we also went from this panorama to this panorama. But the user, as soon as he is here, he should also have the option to go back. So from here to here, and from here to here. Well, this is quite a trivial example, of course. We only have 3 photos in this case, so we can go from here to here, from here backwards and forwards, and from here only backwards. But you can imagine that if you're working with a lot of panoramas, with a lot of relations, it can be quite tricky to keep the topological relation between all the panoramas in a feasible way, a feasible fashion. So in that case, I definitely advise you to make a sketch of your scenery, make a look. Mark the location where your different panoramas are taken, and then just draw lines indicating that, okay, I have a hotspot here going from this point to this point. I have 2 hotspots here going from this point to this point, and from this point to the other one on the square, that you keep it in a feasible way, in a manageable fashion. The last thing that I will show you, and then I would like to end this this session, is a very cool feature. At a certain point, I was thinking, okay, if it's possible to work with panoramas, just with normal panoramas, wouldn't it be very cool to work also with historical photographs? And that's what I'm showing here in exercise 11. Let me just directly show you the results and show you how I did it, because you will be able to do it yourself. I will just enlarge my my view a little bit. So data results partial. Let me make this 1200 and this 800. 1200 and 800. Voila. So I think this is quite an interesting application too. You have a panorama of the situation of last year or 2 years ago. And if you click here, you actually have a normal 2D historical picture. This was a postcard, and I reoriented the postcard on a sphere. So I actually draped it, and you get some kind of impression of the current situation and the old situation. It's not a 100% fit, of course, because the perspective is not the same, and the historical photograph has been taken a little bit further away from it. But I hope you get the idea of what is happening here. So if I go to the code, and I will just show you by the code, you see here actually just 2 pictures. So these are the 2 pictures or the 2 scenes that I have. I have a series of scenes. I have my modern picture referring to the first image, the first panoramic image in my image folder. And I have a hotspot, and the hotspot is referring to scene entitled, with scene ID, I'm sorry, with scene ID old__ square. And old_ square is also considered to be an equirectangular picture. That's why that if we click here, we have this hyperbolic shaped image deformation. So this is real trial and error. And in this case, we set some new parameters. So we say, okay, we have a horizontal field of view. Again, it's this parameter set here. But what we also did, next to setting the pitch and the yaw, we also set a horizontal angle of view and a vertical angle of view. So that's actually defining if we have a photo. Oh, I'm not able to zoom out entirely. What is the angular distance from here via my observer to here? This is my horizontal angle of view. And what is the distance from here to my observer to here? So I actually have 2 angles, a vertical angle and a horizontal angle. And by doing some trial and error, I get a horizontal angle and a vertical angle of 150 and 55 degrees respectively. And by doing that, yeah, you can just make a very interesting historical composite using panoramic images as well. But that's more just for your information, by just setting these parameters. Voila, I would like to stop here. Maybe for some of you, this was the first time that you have been working in with HTML code, and actually we've limited HTML and we did some JavaScripting here. But I really hope that you agree with me that this is extremely cool material to work with. So I would like to encourage you to make some panoramic photos and try to experiment with it. I think there's also an exercise prepared for it where you can demonstrate the results of it. Do you have any questions about this session? And about the material that I showed you? I fully realized that it was in a nutshell, and normally I would walk around and see what's going on your computers. Then in this case, I would like to mention again that this was the last session that we had for photogrammetry and image-based 3D modeling. We will not have a session tomorrow. So tomorrow I will do some preparational laser scanning with the scanner that I have here, the Leica C10. And then we will meet again on Friday, starting with laser scanning. The good news or the bad news, that's the way you can put it yourself, is that I will also be your teacher for laser scanning. So in the laser scanning session, I will talk about some fundamentals of laser scanning, data management. There's a question. And well, thank you for laughing. So the first couple of sessions will be more theoretical. On Monday, we have a guest speaker from Leica, a very interesting and very friendly guy from Italy that will explain you and that will give you some examples of applications using laser scanning. So I would definitely recommend you to join us on Monday. Of course, I'm looking forward to have you joining us every day. And then after Monday, we will work with Cloud Compare. Also for that, I will try to make some videos. So if you want to review the entire material, that you can have a look on it. But we will do some profiling. We will calculate some volumes. We will do some point cloud processing or point cloud filtering, data registration, and that will all become very clear in the next specialist course. Of course, the course has been very compact, especially for the people that don't have a technological background. So if you still have questions, once again, if you have questions on GIS, feel free to ask them. If you have questions also for next week or the days to come about photogrammetry, please don't bother sending me messages via WhatsApp or email or use the Zoom session to ask your questions. So voila, don't know if you have anything else to ask. And otherwise, I'm looking forward to see you on today's Wednesday, to see you on Friday.